Mars, the red planet, closest to Earth in our solar system. Surely life must exist on it? No. When the Viking and Mariner probes went up and sent back nothing, we realized Mars was a barren planet. Lifeless, sterile, uninhabited. Free real estate. In 2019, the first man set foot on the surface of Mars. John Boone, American hero. In 2027, 100 of the Earth's finest engineers and scientists made the first mass landing. Their mission to create a new world. To terraform a planet with no atmosphere, an intensely cold climate, and no magnetosphere, into an Eden full of people, plants, and animals. It is the greatest challenge mankind has ever faced. The ultimate use of intelligence and ability. Our finest dream. Oh, I almost ripped the book in half. Holy shit. So the book starts off with Frank Chalmers narrating as he organizes the assassination of his political opponent and best friend, John Boone, first man on Mars. And then the rest of the book is finding out why Frank Chalmers hates John Boone so much. Spoiler, he fucked his girlfriend. No, I'm kidding. He fucked his girlfriend and... well, they hooked up once. So, basically boyfriend and girlfriend. And Frank was there first, okay? And then John has... Okay, so then the rest of the book is, like, finding out why, like, what the fuck is wrong with Frank. And what the fuck is wrong with John. Because, like, you know, maybe he had his friend assassinated for, like, a good reason. Ow. Blah, 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 science stuff. We're colonizing Mars. There's, like, nothing there to protect anyways. It's not like it's a national park or anything. We're gonna start drilling, baby. And then, what? We're gonna drill, baby, and we're going to turn Mars into a Walmart. Alright, I'm simplifying it way too much. I don't know, I'm really enjoying the book. So last week, Frank is narrating again. We've had like 5 narrators, but Frank is narrating again, and it's after he's assassinated John, because like all the rest of this was like backstory. And so now Frank is literally he's basically in control of Mars, except he also went to live in the desert for like 2 years. And then he realized that he wasn't controlling the planet, which is the whole reason why he killed John. So then he's like, oh, I should probably get out of the desert and go start doing stuff. So he goes back into the real world of Mars, and he starts talking to people, and he's trying to maintain control, because he's like, what the fuck, you guys? I didn't kill John for this. He wants to stop people from moving to Mars. Okay, so it's so hard. I feel like, because you could have many interpretations of politics on your own. Let's just say what Frank is concerned with is control. And you can't have control of Mars if you can't control whose money is involved. And Frank thinks that he So Frank knows that number one, he wants American money. And he needs to convince American moneyed interests that he knows what is best for Mars. I went to Mars to kill John Boone and to run this planet, and I'm all out of John Boones. Literally. So last week, it was really exciting because he finally went to go and talk to Phyllis. Phyllis, who we have not seen since, like, basically the flight out, where she would argue with John. Because she's a religious, I guess you could say a religious fundamentalist. She believes in, like, manifest destiny for Mars, which, you know, might not be too unsimilar to real life situations that are going on. Is there any non-insane person named Phyllis? Yeah, it's basically... her name is Phyllis. She's a real Karen. But yeah, she believes in, like, manifest destiny for Mars, and she's like, I don't see what the problem is. Frank goes and talks to her, and he's like, Phyllis, what the fuck are you doing? You're letting all of these immigrants come in, and they're living in horrible conditions. And she's like, that's just, you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet, Frank. So then Frank gets really mad at her, and he gets back on his grind. Frank gets back on his grind, and he's like, I'll show you, Phyllis. I'm the one who runs this planet. He's gonna kill Phyllis. He's gonna kill Phyllis like he killed John. Except him and John didn't even disagree. He didn't like that people listened to John more than him. And he wanted to impress Maya. But, so anyways, John talks to Phyllis, and Phyllis is like, bro, we can do whatever the fuck we want because God wants us to colonize this planet. And he's like, no, but you gotta do it this certain way. And she says, haha, no. And then he gets really mad, and he starts politicking again. And he was doing 16 hours of meetings back to back all day. He would just go to sleep, wake up the next day, shower, brush his teeth, and go right back into meetings with, like, political leaders back on Earth. And he did it. He slowed down emigration to Mars. And he said to Phyllis, let's see who fights better in quicksand, bitch. That's okay. It was a really bad summary, but that's kind of what I wanted to say. Once resettled in Sheffield, he went back to the continuous round of recording messages and analyzing the incoming replies, dealing with old cronies and with upcoming powers. All the talk patched together in a crazy quilt of arguments proceeding at different rates. At one point, late in the northern autumn, he was engaged in about 50 conferences simultaneously. It was like those people who play chess blind, with a room full of opponents. 3 weeks of this, however, and it began to come around. Basically, because President Incaviglia himself was extremely interested in getting any leverage he could over Amex and Mitsubishi and Armscor. He was more than willing to leak to the media his intent to look into allegations of treaty violations. Oh yeah, okay, so there's the Martian Treaty, which many advocates say should remain like the Antarctic Treaty, which is basically that Antarctica as a continent on Earth it's like we all, like, nobody owns it, I think. Maybe it's been claimed by the British once or twice. But anyways, so the idea is, like, Antarctica is like a scientific place. You know, anybody can go there. Nobody owns it. It's there to study and to do, like, science experiments and research. So there's a lot of proponents for the Martian Treaty to remain a lot like the Antarctic Treaty, where all of the nations of the world respect that it's more of like a scientific station than property. It's a preserve and no one can profit from it. So Frank is, so as you can imagine, lots of people might want to profit off of Mars. Possibly more profitable than Antarctica. Maybe. And when we do colonize Mars, there's going to be really big arguments about, like, what do we do there? How do we do there? How do you do Mars? So 3 weeks of this, and it began to come around, basically because the president himself was extremely interested in getting any leverage he could over Amex and Mitsubishi and Armscor. He was more than willing to leak to the media his intent to look into allegations of treaty violations. He did that, and stocks fell sharply in the relevant quarters. And 2 days later, the Elevator Consortium... Oh, I didn't even explain the elevator. Do you guys know about the elevator? It's basically the new Bubble Dome, but for commerce. Literally, the elevator has made Mars competitive in the solar market again. Because, like, why would you go to Mars if you can just mine an asteroid? Mars would become for artsy, fartsy liberals. We can't have that. So they made an elevator. It's a space elevator. It works through magic and willpower. And it allows you to transfer materials and people from the surface to orbit without, like, without as much effort as launching a rocket. It's pretty cool. And then that also has political implications. Who builds it? Who profits from it? Why? And and Phyllis was very heavily involved in the space elevator, the Martian elevator. And yeah. So she kind of, like, laughed in Frank's face when he's like, maybe we should slow down a little bit. This isn't what I killed John Boone for. And she laughed in his face. And he got really mad and started calling people. He did that, and stocks fell sharply in the relevant quarters. And 2 days later, the Elevator Consortium announced that enthusiasm for Martian opportunities had been so great that demand had exceeded supply for the time being. They would raise prices, of course, as their creed required. But also, they would have to slow down emigration temporarily until more towns and robotic town builders had been constructed. Frank first heard this on a Bar TV news report, one evening in a cafe over his solitary dinner. He grinned wolfishly as he chewed. So we see who's better at wrestling in quicksand, you bitch. He finished eating and went for a walk along the rim concourse. It was only one battle, he knew. And it was going to be a bitter, long war. But still, it was nice. And that is where we left off last week. Then, in the northern middle winter, the occupants of the oldest American tent on the east slope rioted and threw out all of the Unoma police inside and locked themselves in. And the Russians next door did the same. A quick conference with Sluzhinski. A quick conference with Sluzhinski gave Frank the background. Apparently, both groups were employed by the road-building subdivision of Praxis, and both tents had been invaded and attacked in the middle of the night by Asian toughs who had slashed the tent fabric, killed 3 men in each tent, and knifed a bunch of others. The Americans and Russians both claimed the attackers were Yakuza on a race rage, although it sounded to Frank like Subarashi's security force, a small army that was mostly Korean. In any case, Unoma police teams had arrived on the scene and found the attackers gone, and the tents in a turmoil. They had sealed the 2 tents, then denied permission for those inside to leave. The inhabitants had concluded they were prisoners, and enraged by this injustice, they had burst out of their locks and destroyed the piece running through in their stations with welders. And several people on both sides had been killed. The Unoma police had sent in massive reinforcements. And the workers inside the 2 tents were more trapped than ever. Enraged and disgusted, Frank went down again to deal with it in person. He had to ignore not only the standard objections of his staff, but also the new factor's prohibition. Helmut had been called back to Earth. And once at the station, he also had to face down the Unoma police head. No easy task. Never before had he tried to rely so heavily on the charisma of the first 100. And it made him furious. In the end, he had to simply walk through the policemen. A crazy old man striding through all civilized restraint. And no one there cared to stop him. Not this time. The crowd inside the tent looked ugly indeed on the monitors. But he banged on their passage lock door and finally was let in. Into a crush of angry young men and women. He walked through the inner locked door and breathed hot, stale air. So many people were shouting, but he could make nothing out. But the ones in front recognized him and were clearly surprised to see him there. A couple of them cheered. "All right, I'm here," he shouted. Then, "Who speaks for you?" They had no spokesman. He swore viciously. "What kind of fools are you? You better learn to operate the system, or you'll be in bags like this one forever." Bags like this, or body bags? Several people shouted things at him, but most wanted to hear what he would say. And still no signs of a spokesman. So Chalmers shouted, "All right, I'll talk to all of you. Sit down so I can see who's speaking." They would not sit. But they did stand without moving, in a group around him, there on the tattered astroturf of the tent's main square. Chalmers balanced himself on an upturned box in the middle of them. It was late afternoon, and they cast shadows down the slope to the east. It was late afternoon, and they cast shadows far down the slope to the east, into the tents below. He asked what had happened, and various voices described the midnight attack, the skirmish in the station. "You were provoked," he said when they were done. "They wanted you to make some fool move, and you did. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. They've gotten you to kill some third parties that had nothing to do with the attack on you, and now you're the murderers of police. And now you are the It's really hard to read a book out loud to an audience because at some point you feel like you're not even speaking English. You're the murderers the police have caught. You were stupid." The crowd murmured and swore at him angrily, but some were taken aback. "Those so-called police were in on it too," one of them said loudly. "Maybe so," Chalmers said. "But it was corporate troops that attacked you, not some random Japanese on a rampage. You should have been able to tell the difference. You should have bothered to find out. As it is, you played into their hands, and the Unoma police were happy to go along. They're on the other side right now, at least some of them. But the national armies are shifting over to your side, so you've got to learn to cooperate with them. You've got to figure out who your allies are and act accordingly. I don't know why there are so few people on this planet capable of doing that. It's like the passage from Earth scrambles the brain or something." Some laughed a startled laugh. Frank asked them about the conditions in the tent. They had the same complaints the others had, and again he could anticipate and say it for them. Then he described the result of his trip to Clark. "I got a moratorium on emigration, and that means more than just time to build new towns. It means the start of a new phase between the U.S. and the UN. They finally figured it out in Washington that the UN is working for the transnationals. And so they need to enforce the treaty themselves. It's in Washington's best interest, and they're the only ones that'll do it. The treaty is part of the battle now. The battle between people and the transnationals. You're in that battle, and you've been attacked. And you have to figure out who to attack back and how to connect up with your allies. They were looking grim at this, which showed sense. And Frank said, "Eventually, we are going to win. Eventually, we're going to win, you know. There's more of us than them." So much for the carrot, such as it was. As for the stick, that was always easy with people as powerless as these. Look, if the national governments can't calm things down quick, If there's more unrest here and things start coming apart, they'll say hell with it. Let the transnats solve their labor problems themselves. They'll be more efficient at it. And you know what that means for you. We're sick of this, one man shouted. Of course you are, he said. He pointed a finger. So do you have a plan to bring it to an end or not? It took a while to ratchet them into agreement. Disarm, cooperate, organize, petition the American government for help, for justice. Put themselves in his hand, in effect. Of course it took a while. And along the way, he had to promise to address every complaint, to solve every injustice, to right every wrong. It was ridiculous, obscene, but he pursed his lips and did it. He gave them advice in media relations and arbitration technique. He told them how to organize cells and committees, to elect leaders. They were so ignorant. Young men and women, educated very carefully to be apolitical, to be technicians who thought they disliked politics, making them putty in the hands to their rulers. Just like always. It was appalling how stupid they were. Really. And he could not help lashing into them. He left to cheers. Sorry, I made a face because I accidentally closed the book, or I dropped it and I lost my place, but I opened it right back up to where it was. I will keep reading, but probably just a little bit more, just because I feel like we don't have some of the classics here today for the book club, and I feel bad if anyone didn't get the memo that we're having Monday book club. I also said there might not be a book club this week, so, but it looks like there's another natural break in a couple paragraphs. And I feel like that might be easy to summarize next week. They were so ignorant, young men and women educated very carefully to be apolitical, to be technicians who thought they disliked politics, making them putty in the hands of their rulers, just like always. He left to cheers. Yeah, the less we read, the more there is to savor. Not like I'm in a rush or anything, right? It is an accepted reality that Laurie's life is greater than just the stream. Yeah, I wish it wasn't. Streaming can be so fun. I wish I had 30,000 viewers. Because except I wouldn't know how to do that. So instead, I'll just go live my life. I'll be right back.